来自世界各地热心在圣乐上侍奉的前辈、牧者和弟兄姐妹们平安。我是新加坡的杨慧清，仅代表国际基督教合唱指挥团，欢迎大家参加这个史无前例的线上国际诗班节。今天的圣乐访谈对象是诗班诗琴，其实担任乐器伴奏的弟兄姐妹们也能够从中得到相关的提示。国际基督教合唱指挥团3位特约的钢琴伴奏和诗琴培训导师将为我们分享诗班诗琴4个基本但是非常重要的课题。第1讲诗班诗琴的角色和第4讲诗班诗琴的长久基本功是由台湾的马淑慧老师主讲，拥有台湾国立台北艺术学院的钢琴演奏学士文凭。马老师担任教会诗琴超过40年，曾经指挥诗班。他喜爱创作经文诗歌，也为古典圣诗编制钢琴诗琴乐谱。李运兴老师的课题是诗班诗琴如何为第1次排练做准备。新加坡土生土长的运兴老师获得新加坡南洋艺术学院的音乐艺术学士学位，以及美国南伊利诺斯卡邦戴尔大学的钢琴合作硕士学位。运兴老师是新加坡哈利路亚圣乐社指定的伴奏，他很乐意为年轻的音乐家担任伴奏。在美国曾经与管乐团、大学合唱团及著名的得奖作曲家 Morton Lawson 合作过。龚九龙老师要分享的是诗琴与指挥的配搭。毕业自新加坡南洋艺术学院及新加坡伦敦皇家音乐学院，九龙老师他也考获挪威音乐学院的音乐硕士文凭，在许多地区累积了合唱指挥、教导与诗琴的经验。我们听了3位老师洋洋大观的资格和经验后，好料要出场咯。诗班诗琴的角色，马淑慧老师请开讲。
各位诗琴还有弟兄姐妹平安。我们现在要先一起来思想诗班诗琴的角色。诗班诗琴的角色，这段时间我们用2个问题一起来看这个题目。这2个问题是什么呢？第1个问题是，诗班诗琴是绿叶配红花吗？诗班诗琴是绿叶配红花吗？第2个问题是，诗班诗琴是你知道我在等你吗？还是我们手牵手一起走？我们今天用这2个问题一起来思想诗班诗琴的角色。在教会中，我们称呼诗琴，我们马上会联想到的是一个名称，这个名称是一个角色，叫做钢琴伴奏。近代呢，对钢琴伴奏这个专业领域赋予了一个更精准的名称。这个名称有点长，是什么呢？是钢琴合作艺术。担任这个钢琴合作艺术的人，就会被称为钢琴合作艺术家，或是合作钢琴家。我们就会在这个名称里面一直听到一个重复的名词，叫做合作。所以诗班诗琴的角色会是什么呢？诗班诗琴角色有3个分享给各位。第1，它是借用钢琴合作者的概念来看，那么诗班诗琴角色呢，它就是指挥的合作者、协助者或是帮补者。合作者、协助者或者是帮补的人。 第二个是诗班司琴是以诗班指挥为首，为头的一位隐藏的第二指挥。最后诗班司琴是合唱整体中的一个声部。我们有时候会在一些合唱演出里面看到诗班他合唱的伴奏，就是钢琴合作者，他在整个合唱和指挥的中间摆了一部钢琴，因为它是合唱的一个声部。所以既然诗班司琴的角色，它是一位指挥的合作、协助与帮补，是诗班合唱整体的一个声部，所以很快的我们就可以得到一个结论啊，诗班司琴呢是必须与指挥还有诗班合唱手牵手一起走的一位同工，而且这位同工必须以警醒、谨慎、专注、负责的态度来侍奉，必须用警醒、谨慎、专注、负责的态度来侍奉。接下来我们继续看，从前面来看诗班司琴的角色呢，我们就应该要往更深入的方向去思考了。诗班司琴是一个什么样的人呢？他会是一位服侍主的人。服侍主的人，在我们的圣经当中，关于服侍主的教导非常多。那今天我们先用3处的新约圣经来与各位一起彼此勉励。3处圣经都在新约，前2处呢都是保罗的教导。保罗他劝勉和教导服侍主的人，他说在以弗所书6章6到7节，以弗所书6章6到7节，保罗说，不要只在眼前侍奉，像是讨人喜欢的，要像基督的仆人，从心里遵行神的旨意，甘心侍奉，好像服侍主，不是服侍人。要像基督的仆人，要从心里遵行神的旨意，要甘心侍奉，是服侍主，而不是服侍人，讨人的喜欢。这是第1处要与您分享的经文。第2处在罗马书12章11节，也是保罗的劝勉和教导。这段经文是说，殷勤不可懒惰，要心里火热，常常服侍主。要心里火热，常常服侍主。第3处要与您分享的经文是主耶稣自己的榜样。不过这个经文是出现在保罗的书信里面，在腓立比书2章5到8节。你们当以基督耶稣的心为心，他本有神的形象，不以自己与神同等为强夺的，反倒虚己，取了奴仆的形象，成为人的样式。既有人的样子，就自己卑微，存心顺服，以至于死，且死在十字架上。这是主耶稣他自己的榜样，他不与自己与神同等为强夺，他虚己。从刚刚这3处经文来看，特别是主耶稣的榜样来看，我们看到2个字，这2个字叫做舍己，叫做舍己。这是一位服侍主的人要效法主耶稣基督当有的样式。接下来我们看从一本书叫做《古典圣诗弹奏的艺术》这本书，我们借用这本书他所分享诗班司琴是在服侍主，他应该是8个样子的人。这8个样子的人不是8种人是同一位服侍主的人应该具备的这8种特质。第一，他一定必须要是已经重生的人，就是已经得了永活生命的人。不是这样子的人，他不知道他自己是在服侍谁。 所以他必须是已经清楚重生的人。第二，他是要心存战兢的人，不是一个随随便便的人，是心存战兢的人。我们战兢是要有一个对象的哈，这位对象就是那位永生神。第三是要行为正直的人，行为正直的人。第四是要绝对忠心的人，因为绝对对主忠心，而在侍奉上绝对的忠心。第五是要火热殷勤，就像刚刚我们所分享3段经文的第2段，保罗说殷勤不可懒惰，要心里火热，常常服侍主。所以第5是要火热殷勤的人。第6是必须要存着爱心的人，因为诗班司琴我们设定应该是他是一位在音乐上面能够受过更多训练的一位同工。那我们有时候面对我们的诗班的班员，他不是有这么多机会接受音乐的训练，所以在音乐的反应上他可能会稍微慢一点。那么诗班司琴就必须是一个存着爱心的人，来包容他，来忍耐，来等待。第7是要心怀谦卑的人，而不是一个骄傲的人。最后非常重要，是要荣耀归神的人，而不是归给自己，就如同主耶稣的榜样。在看诗班司琴的角色呢，在这一段时间我们要用一个名词来定义，是什么名词呢？就是司琴这个名词。在中文的字典里面，司琴这2个字，司这个字呢是掌管或执掌的意思。掌管呢就是管理咯，执掌的执呢是有职业的职这个字的意思在里面，所以它必须要是专业的。那么琴这个字呢是乐器的总称，我们可以说举例来说是钢琴或是管风琴或者是乐团，都是琴这个字的代表。所以司琴这个名称的定义是什么呢？是在崇拜或诗班中专职负责以琴就是乐器带领会众或是诗班一起向上帝献上颂赞，向上帝祷告，以及宣讲福音真理的一位同工。这是诗班司琴的定义。
Hi everyone. Today I'll be sharing on 3 aspects of preparation for the first choir rehearsal. Firstly, prior knowledge preparation. Secondly, self-preparation of the score. And lastly, what are the other considerations after knowing the music scores well? So as mentioned by our first speaker, Ma Lao Shi, we are collaborative pianists and we are not just a solo pianist. Now, most of us are piano students. We have already spent a great deal of time practicing and performing solo works. And still, we have no clue on how to work with others as collaborative pianists. I used to be one of them, and thinking that there are no real problems or foresee any challenges for me to play in a choir because I have obtained a degree of piano performance certificate. However, I was very wrong. So collaborative pianist indeed is very different from a solo pianist. In my opinion, collaborative pianists have to be as skilled as a solo pianist in terms of playing. On top of that, collaborative pianists need to acquire other skills, such as good sight reading skills, to have a good ear, to be sensitive to singers singing, and the ability to follow others, which in today's context, the conductor. Thus, a collaborative pianist is both a solo pianist and an assistant conductor. A solo pianist, we practice alone and we perform alone. However, if you are a collaborative pianist, you practice alone still, but so that you can work in hand in collaboration with other instrumentalists, singers, dancers, and other artists. To be a good collaborative pianist, one has got to know many things in order to do things at the same time. You need to play all the needed piano parts, follow the gesture of the conductor, and also knowing how loud or soft to play in order to provide good balance and support for the singers. For myself, it is only through many God-given chances for me to work with many choirs and choir conductors that I can say who I am now is because of how they have corrected me and taught me all these years. So for now, today, let me share with you some of the things that I would prepare myself for the very first time for a rehearsal. You need to have prior knowledge. And what that means is we need to know exactly how the rehearsal will be run. Are they going to have singing warm-ups before the choir sings? Or there is only to be rehearsing like sections like the SATV sections. Now, this is important to know because if there are any singing warm-ups and what kind of warm-ups, then you'll be able to play the notes accurately when you are singing. Sometimes you can make up of some very simple chord progression like 5-note scales or different melodic intervals in all keys. So knowing what is needed beforehand, this will greatly minimize any wrong playings, which can seriously affect the singer's pitching and intonation during their warm-ups. Next, we need to know the standard of the choir to know how much to be a better support to the singers. Now, for a newly formed choir, mainly made of singers without any music background, playing every note of their part is essential. Previous chord progressions or even melodic melody needs to be sounded at times prior to their entries so that they can have a reference point on knowing when to sing and at what pitch. Now, for mature choir singing, where they have to deal with more challenging works such as Messiah or even B minor Mass, now the accompaniment gets more difficult. So in this case, some of the accompaniment actually paints the mood of the song. An example, a very well-known piece would be Alleluia, where the pianist needs to sound like an orchestra with only just 10 fingers, right? So this is indeed that you need to know how to prepare for this. As such, please inform the choir conductor or the person in charge as to when you need to receive the score of the music. Personally, I will receive or would like to receive the scores 2 weeks before the first rehearsal. But sometimes if it's not possible, 3 days before will be ideal for me. I would also like to ask for a weekly practice scheduling, listing all the repertoires that has to be rehearsed for each section so that you can prepare before the first rehearsal. So, but however, in many professional choir setting, this is not always available. So because then the conductor might only announce what is going to be rehearsed for the next rehearsal after the first has ended. So if it's such a case for you and you're not comfortable, always go and look and talk to the conductor and ask for a weekly scheduling if possible, if you need help. So now that we understand what to expect for the first rehearsal, let's talk about how you should prepare the music score yourself. Like what you always hear, right? Like piano teachers say, do not play wrong notes, wrong rhythms. This is really important that we learn to play the right notes because we are not solo pianists, but our piano part has a great deal to do with playing the right melody of the voices as well. So study it well before you jump right into playing the notes is important. Listen to related recordings of the song, if there are any, will also really help or aid you in terms of learning. Piano or orchestra or other ensemble-related settings are also possible if there are related recordings. Knowing the structure of the song can also help you play better as a pianist, but more importantly, you can then identify with the conductor's way of conducting, and this will better lead the choir members into singing. I would also like to point out that for preludes, interludes, and postlude of the piano part has to also be thoroughly practiced. This is so much for that the openings are clearly played and prepared And that, like, for instances, for songs that are familiar to the audiences, like Rejoice from Messiah, these are familiar tunes. So you should never allow any mistakes when you play these passages while you practice. Always stop to analyze what is wrong. If you ever play a passage that you have played for more than 2 times wrongly. So work it out slowly with a metronome if needed and revert back to the needed tempo. We also have to practice playing all the different SATB, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, vocal parts. I would like to start playing the melody line, which is usually in the soprano section, and slowly add other voice parts to it, usually either the bass or the alto. And if the choir is singing mostly in unison, one way is to practice to play the piano accompaniment in a more simpler way, with just the left hand playing accompaniment chords, basic chords, and the right hand playing the melody. There's another way, which is actually more difficult to do for most pianists, is while you are practicing to sing the melody and play the accompaniment. Now, given 2 weeks, these are possible. So it will be very good for your own practice if you can work it out yourself during your practice. So now moving on, pianist needs to be ready almost immediately to begin from any bar at any beat of the song, so that you can give singers their note pitches whenever the conductor stops. So an example will be you have to get ready to give pitches of either SA, soprano alto, or SB, soprano bass, ST, TB, AT, or even more parts like S1, S2, soprano, soprano 1, soprano 2 with bass 2. So you have to train yourself to also foresee what the choir members will have problems at, just like how you will need to foresee like a conductor. So check with the conductor beforehand whether pitches are to be given from bottom up or top down. Different conductors might have different preferences. The last but not the least is on page turning. It is a very important skill for all musicians, and that of course include us, pianists. Personally, I engage page turner who will show up at my last rehearsal as well as the concerts. There are other people who do not engage page turner at all. Now, in this era, I would say sometimes you can even use digitalized iPads or other things that help you to record the score, and that you can just swipe it with a finger and it will just work fine. And for some of my suggestions for like a 4-page score, I will actually trim the sides of the score, tape them together, and make it as a whole page. So I do not have to even do a page turn. So now that you have prepared the score well, and there are other considerations I would like to suggest as well. Firstly, check the position of the piano before the rehearsal begins so that you can have a good view on both the scores and the conductors. And see if the place is open, maybe like 20 minutes before the rehearsal starts, so that you can do this. Secondly, things other to have your score, which is a pencil with you. Always get ready a pencil so that you can pencil down things easily, like say the pronunciation of the words, expression marks, or breath marks. Thirdly, be flexible in times of responding to the conductor or singer's need, and try your very best to support them with all that you know. Always be ready to make changes and expect mistakes to happen along the way. Now, we have to also learn to accept mistakes humbly because no one is perfect. And I would say that we learn from our mistakes and use them as stepping stones to serve other people better. Sometimes you might even need to sight read new materials on the spot. So it is very important to know how to sight read fast and along the way of your learning. Lastly, never stop or correct your mistake by repeating the bars at any point when or unless the conductor stops. Now, I always tell my music piano students to practice without stopping. If not, you might have a habit of doing that at the actual day. So this will have very severe consequences if you stop or repeat, and these are quite damaging to both your conductor and your choir singers when they are either rehearsing or doing the actual performance. So all the above is knowing how to prepare yourself. And I would say this path of learning will never end because it will take a lot of courage, a lot of patience, and you have to repeat and repeat over a lot of times during rehearsal settings when the choir is still at their learning stages. So may we guide our hearts, our thoughts and minds, and always align our hearts back to how Jesus has served us during his time here, and continue persevering to serve others like how Jesus himself would do that. And may God strengthen us in all this time, including pandemic time, that we will always have to prepare ourselves well so that at any time we can resume our full-scale practices and also concerts. So God bless you. Keep safe. That's all.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Ma Lao Si, for the sharing. It is, I'm very privileged to be here. The area which I'm sharing is on how the pianist and the conductor can work better together and what are some of the basic steps. Now, some of the basic steps that are going to be mentioned here will have to be often overlooked because the pianist and the conductor, as well as the choir, essentially is a musical team. And which means when there is a team, there is group dynamics, there is communication exchanges, and also mutual conflicts, if not sometimes as we ideally want it, mutual understanding taking place during music making, at rehearsals and performances, and even beyond that for all the parties within this choir, that is the choir, the choristers, the conductor, and also the pianist. So my specific focus here will be on the basic dynamic between the choir pianist and the conductor and how they can function and work together effectively. This is an overall and a very brief discussion based on my experiences with the little time that we have, I can share with you. Now, first and foremost, I think it is absolutely critical and essential that the conductor and the pianist establish a good sense of communication, that is two-way communication. Now, to establish a communication means often meeting together. Yes, they should meet together, they should talk, and it's not always just like in a choir rehearsal setting where it is almost always the conductor talking, but the pianist just responding through the playing, and the same also for the choristers. Now, this meeting usually should happen prior to the rehearsal or sometimes even minutes before the rehearsal, but I think we should allow more of that to happen, especially if they've never met before. So to meet outside of the rehearsal, and definitely before the rehearsal, they should meet first. And to get to know each other, yes, to get to know each other. How can two people work together if they don't know each other? So what I mean to meet, again, is something fun and to sometimes maybe have a meal together or have a coffee or tea before the rehearsal for a real face-to-face talk over many things as normal human beings would before getting into the music. So as to know the person, break the ice, build trust, and get comfortable with one another. Now, too often, as I said before, we spare little thought over these kind of common and mundane things. We think it's not important. We don't need to do this because I'll be seeing this person anyway during the rehearsal, and we will be working together over many rehearsals. Why then do we still need to meet aside from rehearsal? Because within the rehearsal, there are many things that happen, and meeting outside of rehearsal, we can allow that which we cannot do within a rehearsal to occur. So I too am guilty frequently for overlooking the importance of this, until I realize that whoever you work with needs to become your friend. And it's not very Christian of us to only do the work and never fellowship with one another. So in this meeting then, what can we really talk about? Primarily, it is to warm up with some kind of a unimportant, simple daily go about things like, how are you? How are things? So what are you doing now? If necessary, before getting into the real business, which is finding out each other's expectations for rehearsals and of music, as well as outlining individuals' method of working together. Ideally, this would include talking about what the rehearsal structure is like Jennifer has mentioned before. What is the order of the pieces? What is going to happen this week, or in a series of rehearsals that we're having, and what the conductor normally does as well within the rehearsal. What are some of the habits, or what are some of the processes that the conductor would carry out with the choir, and what the conductor also expects of the choir and also of the pianist as well, and how the pianist can assist and help where necessary, or to provide support, so as to avoid any kind of miscommunication or non-communication and any unnecessary trouble that might arise during rehearsals. This is also important because it also helps us to reduce that kind of resentment, if any, which might be accumulated over time if we don't really communicate beyond rehearsal about some of the things that happen within the rehearsal. So what is this accumulated resentment? How so? So I have many times worked with conductors of whom I had no idea about how to play, for simply because the conductors never explained how they wanted certain things to be done in rehearsals. For this very reason, conductors had to take precious time and attention away from the choir and from the rehearsal to explain or even demonstrate on the piano what they wanted. Yes, with the choir all watching. So which, from the choir's point of view, this must have been really awkward, and for the pianist, somewhat embarrassing too. Yes, conductors have embarrassed indirectly because they assume you telepathically knew what they wanted without telling you or informing you in advance. So all this can and should be prevented with the most basic thing that we can do as human beings: to talk nicely, to communicate, to talk about it. And even if in the rehearsal it does come to a point when conductor needs to explain or express the intentions to the pianist, this should be done tactfully and with wisdom and with care for the other person. So, moreover, it is also in this manner that we can begin to learn how to compromise with one another and to begin to learn also how to work together with new people. Now, second to this talk is the communication on the music and the musical details of the pieces to be rehearsed. Seldom do we talk openly and a lot about music beyond rehearsals. And this is, I think, not very healthy musically for musicians. One of the musicians that I collaborated with in the past, over many years, from childhood actually, with which I think we work very well together and am very pleased with, is a violinist. Now, we have mutually shared thoughts and feelings about music we worked with and worked on together each time we met and spoke. It was also talking about music that we would talk on and on over hours, if not face-to-face, then on the phone, definitely. We played and worked together whilst encouraging one another and giving constructive comments. I believe we need more of this kind of thing between choirs, conductors, and choir pianists. Then I am certain it will make the working relationship and rehearsal experience altogether ever more fulfilling. As without an open heart to share and speak music to the working partner, it is more difficult to demand certain musical wishes from the other person and to actually get it if one does not even know how the person thinks about the pieces, or that we do not even express our thoughts on the music. Aside from this, without some kind of rapid first established between the two, or between these two musicians, doing anything together would be a lot harder. So for the conductor and pianist, speaking of music things would be the conductor's opinions, ideas about the music, and seeing where fit the pianist can too contribute where an area is amiss and or neglected, or even some of his or her own experiences or solutions that might help the conductor. Conductor is also then required to express the interpretation of the music and musical concerns and or problems to the pianist, so that the pianist knows exactly what worries the conductor and how to help and assist, when it comes to those pieces and those areas in rehearsals. This is also to help to keep the rehearsal very interesting and effective, and not playing any guesses when the rehearsal is happening. I recall an experience working with a conductor who invited me over many occasions to talk and to go through music that we were to rehearse. We spent hours to discuss and talk and to play, as well as to sing the music, so as to establish first, a good working relationship or a good working rapport. We spoke also potential problems that might arise in the choir, or even my own pianistic problems or limitations, so that we mutually understood what were our limitations. And also I would share what I worked on, and also we would talk to one another about what to listen for, and also how to respond to one another. And also for the pianist, it would be to come up with ideas or even solutions to help remedy the problem, to support the singing, to enrich and color the music. From this experience, I learned about how the choir works. I learned about what it is even like to be the conductor, and to see the bigger picture of the music, or to see the music from a different angle. And also the many roles that we play and contribute in the music and rehearsal. In this, the pianist then becomes the physical and musical extension of the conductor and musical score on the keyboard as a musical demonstrator. Yes, the conductor and the pianist thinking and mutual understanding allows them to become one strong team. The pianist demonstrates an impression or end goal of what the choir should aspire to. That is the music they work towards. It could be a chord, to let them hear a chord so they know, the choir knows, this is the chord, this is the result that we should be getting. Or giving a bigger picture of the music or end product. So this is what the piece sounds like for the choir. Through this, choir can be inspired to sing with more enthusiasm and willingness. Pianist then also helps to highlight what the choir ought to listen and focus and attend as per the conductor's wish. There are many more functions and roles that the pianist can carry out, but will not be talking about here. But some of the pianist's roles through this working with the conductor and preparation would be, then the pianist will be in a better position to persuade the choir with the music, to console, or to also captivate and excite and inspire, and even to some extent manage the choir through the playing of the music. Moreover, in knowing the conductor's vision and expectations as a pianist, the pianist is then able to actively participate in the rehearsal process by reacting spontaneously and responding accurately to the spoken instructions and even the unspoken cues, so as to keep the choir engaged and to help the conductor bar to bar, moment to moment, and to keep the music going always. From there, the rehearsal will be able to make much progress. The conductor may say, for example, this chord sounds like this, and the pianist would immediately jump into it. Or the conductor may say, we start from bar 7, and immediately the pianist gives the notes without being asked by the conductor. Moreover, when playing with the choir, the pianist can support based on what they hear and listen, such as when the choir has a tempo problem, the pulse can be more accented in the accompaniment so as to help them keep the speed. And this all boils down to actually with the conductor and the pianist knowing what each other is really thinking about and worried about or concerned about, and what sort of help that one can give the pianist, can give to the conductor and the choir. Lastly, the conductor is always to be sympathetic and understanding in knowing the strengths and the skill set of the pianist and what the choir is capable of as well, and should always be supportive, not just for the conductor, but all of us, the choir, the conductor, and the pianist, be very supportive and encouraging regardless of any circumstances. I always feel that no matter where we are, we should never let the ego take the upper hand, because we can always improve, and that should be the definition of excellence within music and choir. And it is an attitude rather than a state. So should the pianist or even the conductor or choir members be performing under expectations, we're to always be patient and wise to keep the rehearsal in a place filled with positivity and full of motivation as we approach to address and the underlying problems and concerns with care. So how can the pianist and conductor come together to do this is, again, at the end of the day, to be open about it in thinking, in sharing, and to be really talking about music and beyond music as well. Yes, that is talking before the rehearsal, talking after the rehearsal, and talking beyond music itself. Thank you very much.
谢谢运欣老师和九龙老师的分享。接下来我们来看诗班司琴长久的基本功要做一些什么事情呢？首先，每一位诗班司琴都应该要自己问自己一个问题，就是我是一位追求日益精进的诗班司琴童工吗？我是不是一位追求日益精进的诗班司琴童工呢？有一位知名的国外资深钢琴合作艺术家曾经这么说，他说，优秀的钢琴伴奏会带给指挥、合唱、独唱家或器乐演奏家在音乐诠释上的灵感、创意与提醒。我再说一次，这位资深的钢琴合作艺术家他怎么说的呢？他说，一位优秀的钢琴伴奏会带给指挥、合唱、独唱家或器乐演奏家在音乐诠释上的灵感、创意与提醒。所以一位诗班司琴必须要养成时时进修的观念与习惯。这个养成时时进修的观念跟习惯呢，它的目的是为了把最好的献给上帝，而不是为了个人的荣耀。接下来我们来看诗班司琴长久进修与练习，它的目的是什么呢？其实用一个很简单的一个表达，就是要把钢琴弹好。要把钢琴弹好，是我们长久进修练习的目标。因为诗班司琴呢，虽然他不是一位在当下他不是在独奏，不过诗班司琴确实必须具备独奏的能力。所以诗班司琴长久的一些基本功，我们可以练习什么呢？我这边要分享8个部分。第一个部分是诗班司琴时时常常都要练习的，就是音阶与爬音。虽然这个练习每一次练的时候我们会觉得哇好枯燥，但是如果我们可以把音阶跟爬音弹得很流畅、很清楚，速度可以很稳定，音可以弹得很平均，把它弹得好听，那么音阶跟爬音的练习就会是一个非常重要的练习了。接下来第2个我们可以长久做的基本功呢，是常常练习一些古典音乐家所写出来的练习曲或是独奏曲，古典音乐家所创作的练习曲或是独奏曲。第3，诗班司琴可以常常练习的是什么呢？是一些合唱诗班司琴谱。合唱诗班司琴谱 我们打开这样子的谱来练习它的伴奏的部分，练习合唱的部分，都会是对我们来说是很重要的练习。像 ICCCS 所出版的荣耀颂歌系列或是新歌系列，都会是你应该要带回家拿起来练习的合唱诗班司琴谱。接下来诗班司琴还应该要练习什么呢？诗班司琴还要练习乐曲分析。乐曲分析绝对不会是指挥他唯一只有指挥要做的事情。其实诗班司琴也应该要练习乐曲分析。诗班司琴练习乐曲分析呢，要锻炼出有效的熟悉乐曲的一个效率，让自己能够更精准的掌握乐曲的内容，而不是只有掌握钢琴的部分，是掌握整体的内容，好让我们知道我们在什么地方我们要怎么弹，好让我们可以更快的掌握到指挥可能会希望有的期望。下一个诗班司琴要长久的基本功是尽量把握去参加一些相关的训练课程，这个部分非常重要，几乎不然你也应该要找一位合适的老师来指导你。下一个诗班司琴要常练习的是经常关注跟钢琴合作艺术有关的书籍、文章或是影片，同时也需要多看有指挥的一些影片，像有指挥的诗班的影片啦、合唱的影片啊，有指挥的乐团的影片，或是常去观摩诗班的练习。那么这些练习呢，可以让我们可以多增加一些看懂指挥要求和表达的一些经验。下一个诗班司琴要常练习的是要常去聆听一些优质的钢琴演奏、古典音乐、古典圣乐和古典圣诗，常聆听，把自己的耳朵养坏。我的老师说，把耳朵养坏，养得非常的挑剔，让我们听到好的跟不好的，我们是很有反应的，让我们能够更精准的往好的方向去进步。接下来呢，我要请各位诗班司琴常参加诗班的排练，这个部分非常重要。借着常参加排练，我们可以培养出4个特点。第一个特点是可以更了解你的指挥的手势。第二个特点是可以更了解指挥的想法和他的习惯。第3个特点是可以了解诗班整体声音以及它的状态。最后一个特点是排练的时候呢，司琴自己所应该具备的专注力、耐性跟耐力，培养自己所需要的专注力、耐性与耐力。有的时候诗班在练习的过程常有一些重复，这些重复呢，诗班的司琴需要发挥自己的耐性、专注力和耐力一起练习。最后我们要一起来看诗班司琴在练习的时候，在自我练习的时候，请常使用节拍器，帮助自己锻炼一个很重要的能力。这个能力是什么呢？是能够掌握速度很稳定的能力，以及能够分辨自己的速度是不是很稳定的这个能力。节拍器的练习在过程当中是有点枯燥的，而且这个声音我们也需要习惯它，但是节拍器可以帮助诗班司琴培养出速度稳定或是判断速度是否稳定的能力，因为这个能力对诗班司琴来说非常的重要。请诗班司琴常使用节拍器来练习。以上是我的分享，谢谢。
好，我们听了马老师、李运兴老师还有龚九龙老师，他们从圣经的角度来做教导，告诉我们司琴职责的一些提示，以及他们本身的经验。我们谢谢他们。 也谢谢大家参加这个访谈。从这当中，我们得着认真看待圣乐服事角色的要求，以及老师们他们所提供的担任司琴或者伴奏这个职分上面的提点，帮助我们成为教会诗班或者合唱组合宝贵的器皿，做主合用的仆人。作为结束，让我们同心献上感恩的祷告。爱我们的阿爸天父，我们感谢你赐下音乐给我们，你也赐下各种音乐的恩赐给我们，让我们乐意为你献上自己的才能，服侍主，并你的教会和群体，让我们满满的得着服侍上面基本却非常重要的认知与提示。我们同心恳求你使用我们，愿圣灵常居住在我们的心中，赐我们火热的心，乐意继续侍奉。愿一切都荣耀主你的圣名。我们同心感恩祈求，是奉主耶稣基督的名。阿们。